Hi guys, welcome back to Muffin Shed. In a few days I'm going to be making a video on Transformers. Not robots in disguise, but Transformers that we use in everyday life. When I was thinking about doing this and I was looking at the script, I realised that maybe some of you would struggle a little bit with the terms, and what I wanted to do in this video is just for some of the younger viewers, maybe years sort of 7, 8 and 9, is just go through the basics of electricity, what it is, some of the simple terms, and how you can sort of visualize them and how it all works. So electricity, what is it? Now I do apologize for the crappy drawing pieces of A4, but I've yet to find something on YouTube where I can make those really funky animations and stuff. So let's get straight into the video. You've all heard of volts, amps, resistance, watts, but what do they actually mean? So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go through each one of those terms. I'm going to show you how they all relate to each other and how that will all tie into the video on Transformers, robots in disguise, later on. Okay? So essentially, what is electricity? Electricity is the flow of electrons. There's a lot of debate about this, about whether electrons flow from positive to negative, negative to positive. It doesn't really matter. All you've got to think about it is it's a flow of electrons from one side of a charge to another. Now there are two sorts of electricity. There's a direct current and there's alternating current. Again, a little bit too deep for this video. If you want to go into something like that, we'll do another video and we'll describe the differences between DC and AC current. So we'll start with volts or voltage. So what is voltage? Voltage is potential difference. I want you to imagine a tank of water. The tank of water is 10 meters up and you are sort of on the ground. The higher the tank is, the more voltage there is. So it's the difference between the charge, how far that charge is going to have to travel. Okay, so people seem to think high voltage kills, but there's a very common misconception about voltage and amps, and volts don't kill and amps kill and all this kind of stuff. It's a combination of both. But if you think about it, if you imagine it in that way, a tank of water, the higher the tank of water is, the higher the voltage is. Now sticking with that analogy, let's look at if you had a tank of water with 1 litre in it and it was 100 metres up, but there was a tiny little hole in it and it was dripping down and it hit you on the head, well, you wouldn't really feel anything, would you? It's like when you go out in the rain, it doesn't hurt. Now, imagine there was a tank of water above you and it was only 10 metres above you, but there was 10,000 litres of water in there and that dropped on you. Well, that would pretty much kill you. Which brings us on to amps, or current as we call it. So amps is how much water can actually flow. So voltage is how high the tank is, and if you think about current is how much water there is in the tank. Next we go on to resistance. Resistance is if you imagine water flowing through a pipe. You can have a huge tank of water, maybe sitting up in your loft, you've got a cold water tank. If you've got a very small pipe, that water will come through that pipe. And it will come through that pipe at a certain pressure. If that pressure gets exceeded, if you try and push too much down that pipe, eventually what will happen, and I'll try and grab my Sharpie, that pipe will start to bulge and eventually it'll burst. Okay, so when we're talking about high current and high voltage, we also need to remember the resistance. So the resistance is the diameter of that pipe. The bigger the pipe, the more voltage, the more current you can run through that pipe. And that's where electrical wire comes in. You don't want to be running high current through a very, very thin wire because it creates heat. The next thing we want to talk about is watts. Now, watts is the relationship between voltage and current. So it's basically the power that is capable of being taken from the voltage and the amperage. So again, taking the water analogy, you have a tank of water with a pipe in it, and the amount of water in there and how high that tank of water is, it will flow through that pipe, and if you imagine that's a water wheel, depends on how fast it will spin that water wheel. And that's what basically powers your kettle, your cooker, your toaster, or what have you. So again, just going back to current, if you try and put too much current through a small pipe or a small wire, you are going to create heat. And the way that we get around this, and this is moving on to the transformer video which will be coming along soon, is what we want to do is we want to convert that large amount of current or a large amount of water in volume here into a much higher voltage or a much higher potential difference, so that we don't create that heat, and then that way we can transmit the power. And there's a very, very simple explanation and a very, very simple equation, which is power equals amps times voltage. And that's how we calculate the power. So, in conclusion, high voltage, it's good for transmitting power over long distances, and high current is good for doing work, hence why we need transformers. Now, yep, this video has been a little bit dry, so what I'm going to do now, I'm going to show you just a little bit of a quick experiment to show you the way that we can step up a very, very low voltage from a very, very innocuous source. So what I've got here is a very, very innocuous 9-volt battery. You'll see that in toys, you'll see it in various remote controls or bits of kit around the house, and if I was to put my fingers across there, it does absolutely nothing. I can't feel anything, doesn't hurt. Might hurt a bit if I licked it, but I don't expect you to try that, because trust me, it's not good. But what I'm now going to do is I'm going to put it through this thing here, which is basically a transformer which steps up the voltage. So there's only 9 volts in here. So if you remember what we said about voltage, but what this is going to do is, as a transformer, it's going to step that voltage right up. But what it's going to do is going to reduce the current that's coming out of here. Now, I'm going to do this very, very carefully, because this thing scares the hell out of me, and you'll see why in a minute. So, here we go. Muffin shed in the interests of science once again. I can get these crocodile clips on. We'll connect that onto there. I'll connect that onto there. I'm going to use a pair of pliers here, and you'll see why. So, are you ready for this? And all of that out of the humble 9-volt battery. Thank you for watching, and I hope you come back and watch the transformer video when it comes out. See you soon.